preparing for this, I came across some funny jokes, but whether it's funny or not is up to you. So Leviticus is like the terms and conditions on an app. You skim read it and hope you haven't agreed to sacrifice goat. And there was a few others, but they were a bit questionable, so I didn't know. But in all seriousness, Leviticus changed my life. Back in 2024, I decided to read the Bible in a year, and I really wanted to start with finding out about God's holiness. So I started with Leviticus because that's where he talks about his holiness. And I think I studied it for, I thought it was 2 years, but it actually wasn't about that long. But on and off, I was pregnant with Asher at the time, and I did have a big gap once he was born. But I did spend a lot of time just really wanting to find out. And I do think it was Holy Spirit led, because I've read Leviticus in the past, and just like that, I've skim read it and thought, it doesn't apply to us now. I don't really need to know this, and I've skipped it. But this time, I felt something really different. I felt a real pull on my spirit, and I started to feel really excited about what I was learning. I had a commentary that my mother-in-law Heather bought, which was really helpful, and I just started to learn lots of different things. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to give you a little bit of that today. But first, I need to start with slide. So a little bit of a testimony. Abandoned is an adjective that means left behind, empty, or no longer used, cared for, or wanted. Has anybody ever felt this way? You can feel this way from a mother or a father, an important caregiver, a husband or a wife, a good friend. It can feel like loneliness, rejection, anything like that. For me, that was my dad. So my early childhood, from before the age of 9, I have some really happy memories. We lived up in Yorkshire, and I can remember going out on bike rides with my dad. I think he was really involved. He would play with us, he would take us out on day trips, and I can remember feeling quite happy. When I think about that time in my life, I think about summertime. I don't know why, but that's what it appears in my head. Every memory I have is of the summer, and it's happy. And then my parents decided to move down to Deal in Kent. My father's roots in Kent, he was in the Royal Marines Band, up until there was an IRA bomb in 1989. Some of his friends were killed, so he had a lot of trauma from that and decided to move away from Kent, but he still had some roots there. And when he was visiting one time, he met the pastor of this church who was starting a new church with a therapeutic ministry, but it was kind of new. And it was the aim of this church was for couples and individuals to heal, but it had some sort of new age background. I won't be able to go into any of that today, but it wasn't very biblical, and a lot of the teachings that they had didn't really fit with what we actually believe as Christians. So we moved to Deal in Kent, and my mum stayed up in Yorkshire to sell the house. And while she was there, my dad looked after us. We lived in rented accommodation. And I can remember my dad putting us in our pyjamas, and there was no mobile phones then, so he would take us to the end of the road where there was a phone box, and we'd talk to my mum on the phone, and she would say goodnight and sing us songs. But I do remember really missing my mum and not really understanding why she wasn't with us. And then eventually my mum moved to Kent, but one of the strange things that this community did was they separated husbands and wives so that they could work through any problems or trauma from their lives separately before coming back together and hopefully being better. But that didn't happen. Actually, what happened was it really damaged families, and it caused a lot of huge problems in the children that grew up in this church, including myself. And we ended up being separated from my mum for about 2 years. So she was living in a community house where we lived with my dad. And unfortunately, my dad wasn't that good at his parenting. He wasn't always very kind. He wasn't very interested. And one of the things I remember is after school, I'd be waiting outside school. And before he'd come and get me, it would be dark everybody had gone home, there'd be nobody there, and on one occasion, one of the teachers had finished work and she'd come and she stood with me, and I can remember thinking, oh, goodness, you don't need to stand with me, this is normal, but she must have said something to my dad, something like that. But I mean, this is just a small, I couldn't obviously say everything that's caused pain and this feeling of abandonment and just not feeling, I didn't feel like I had any value, and why wasn't I a priority? A lot of the time in my childhood I was like, you know, why am I not a priority? Why am I not valued? And I think one of the painful things was this change from this dad who had appeared to be very loving to suddenly being very disinterested, and I wouldn't be able to talk about all that now, but for some reason being part of this church was quite damaging. We walked away from proper Christian faith to something that wasn't actually, it was actually quite damaging. There were some other good things. We went over as missionaries to Egypt, and I actually had an amazing time in Egypt, but the church was bringing this, they weren't really bringing Christianity, they were bringing this new ministry, and you can imagine the other ministries in this, missionaries in this area were a bit offended. They didn't think this was a good idea, so they didn't get on board with what we were doing, and eventually, after a few years, we did go back to the UK, and then my family went over to America, but we were only there for 6 months, again to spread this ministry, but the Christians there were like, this is a bit odd, so we didn't stay there, and we came back to the UK then. So at some point then, my dad decided that he would leave our family for good, and he actually moved back over to Egypt, and for about 20 years now, he's had very little to do with my life, and it has caused a lot of pain in my life. It's affected my relationships with other people, it's affected my, you know, how I am with, you know, colleagues at work. You know, it really affects your identity. If somebody so important doesn't show you the love or the value that you're meant to have, you start to believe it, and you start to think, well, there must be something wrong with me. If somebody like my dad is meant to love me, there must be something wrong with me. And I did start to get quite angry with God. Why couldn't I have a dad who wanted me, who cherished me, loved me and prioritised me? Why did you, God, let this happen in my life? I don't understand, because lots of other people have people who love them. Why has this happened to me? I couldn't understand it. But God had something better for me, and he has absolutely changed my life. He has changed that victim mentality that I had, because when you grow up in that, you do suddenly get this, you become a victim, and I don't know why that is, but it does, and it becomes part of your identity. But God had something better for me, and he has changed that part of me and in my heart. So this is when we get onto Leviticus. That was a bit random, but anyway, I get past that bit now, so that's good. So how did Leviticus change my life? So one of the big things that God has changed in my life is he has changed the way I view. I grew up in this church that there wasn't much Bible teaching. I don't remember learning that much about the Bible. I had a very warped view about Christianity. I didn't really understand what it was all about. I had some very strange ideas. So reading the Bible and reading Leviticus, it changed my view of the Bible. It gave me a deeper understanding of God's holiness. It explained the purpose behind sacrifices, priests and the tabernacle. This is Leviticus now. It encouraged me to read the rest of the Bible with greater context and understanding. It helped me understand many parts of the Bible that I had previously found difficult. So whenever I read the Bible now, if I come across somebody who's giving a burnt offering, I can understand now that that person is, totally surrendering to God. It's a voluntary act, and it's an atonement for sin. Whereas before I would have brushed past reading about burnt offerings, but I don't really understand. But now I've got a lot more understanding to my Bible reading. Or other parts, like one example is King Uzziah in 2 Chronicles, where he offers incense on the altar, which obviously, if like only the priest can do that. So just it's helped me to understand other parts of the Bible, and I just feel like God has spoken his truth to me through reading the Bible. I think it's one of the best ways that he's communicated to me. is through reading the Bible. And the biggest thing is God is making a way for us to be in his presence forever. Everything he has done and is doing is so we can be with him forever. So Leviticus changed my view of God. God's heart has always been to dwell with his people. He's a holy God. He has no need for himself to dwell with us. He chooses to be with us. None of what was done in Leviticus was for God, other than him wanting to dwell with us. It was for the benefit of the Israelites. So what does that mean? He wants to be near us. How can a holy God dwell among a sinful people without destroying them? So all the laws, all the sacrifices, all the cleansing laws, that helped people live in his presence. Because if you are, sorry, I'm losing my words. If they weren't to do these things, then they would be destroyed. It changed my view of sin. Sin is serious. Sin needs to be dealt with. Unforgiven sin prevents us from dwelling with a holy God. Sin is dealt with through an unblemished sacrifice. God instructed his people how to remain holy through his cleansing laws so that they could dwell in the Lord's presence. I found this quite interesting because you can kind of you can rush through the cleansing laws because they're quite boring. But one of the big things I got was like mold and death. If you came into contact with a dead body, it contaminated you. If your house was mouldy, it was like that contamination that prevented you then from being holy and being set apart. So then you weren't able to come into the presence of God. So the way I saw it suddenly was, this is a loving God who is helping his people to have ways to be cleansed so that they can dwell with him. This isn't a God who wants a lot of rules. He wants to dwell with you. And it's like he's saying, here is how you dwell with me. Leviticus, it changed my view of Jesus. Jesus is the perfect sacrifice. Jesus is the perfect priest. Jesus is the true temple. Through faith in Jesus, we have salvation. What does that even mean? It means one day we will dwell with God forever. Everything that he's doing is so that we won't die. One day we will have eternal life and we'll live with him forever. Leviticus, it changed my view of salvation. And here are some Bible verses. Jesus came to be with us on earth. He was the invisible God, and he came in the flesh to be with us. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook and the rocks were split. The moment he breathed his last breath, the curtain was torn in two, and I found that quite powerful. The curtain separated God in the Holy of Holies from the holy place, into the outer court, and then out to everybody else. God was very much separated. A holy God was very much separated from his people. But when Jesus died, the curtain was torn in two, and now we can come into his presence whenever we want. We can run up to his throne. We don't have to. There's nothing keeping us from his presence. He lives within us. His Holy Spirit is within us. And then I love that Revelation. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God." And this is where we're aiming for. One day, God will be with us forever, and we'll see him face to face. Leviticus changed my view of myself. I am loved. I am wanted. I am pursued. I am cherished. I am valued. I was made on purpose. And we can turn this around to you. You are loved. You are wanted. You are pursued. You are cherished. You are valued. You were made on purpose. What does this all mean for us? It means that we can know that we are loved. And how should we respond to this? If you resonate with any of this feeling, of alone, rejected, abandoned, I want to invite you to receive the overwhelming desire for God to dwell with you. This is what it's all about. I think sometimes people can view God like he's this far off God with all these laws, but those laws were meant to draw us close to him. He has been making a way from the very beginning of time to to be with us. And if there's any one thing I want you to get from what I'm saying and what God has taught me is he wants to be with us desperately. And the way it's changed my life is, I had this dad, I still have this dad, who didn't really love me, probably because of his own, hurts and things like that. I don't think he really knew how to love me. And it's caused a lot of pain in my heart. But God has completely changed my view of that. It's changed my view of myself. But it's given me the hope that one day, it's still painful at times. Things like, my children, my dad doesn't have much to do with my children, so that is another hurt, it's another rejection. But, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but at the same time, it doesn't matter, because what's coming in the future and what God's got planned in the future is just so much more, the love that he has for us. And I think that's it. Sometimes we're angry at God because he lets bad things happen, and we can't really understand that. And actually we can start to think, maybe actually God hates me, or maybe God isn't a good God. But what I've learned from reading Leviticus, but from all my Bible reading is, no, he loves us so passionately. He wants to dwell with us so passionately. This is what it's all about. He is a God who, he is relational. That from the very beginning of time, when he was with humanity, he's been making a way. That's how he's changed my life. He's still changing my life. And one day I look forward to running into his arms. If you are struggling with something else this morning, this might not resonate with you at all. You might not have that feeling of abandonment or rejection, but there might be something else you're struggling with. But I just want to emphasize how God came to take away any feelings of shame. He came to take away our sin, again, so that we can